Hello, wonderful IELTS Energy listeners. We have a very special expert guest today, Steve Kaufmann. Hello, welcome to IELTS Energy.
Hello, Jessica. Happy to be here. Nice to see you again.
So, Steve, you are a polyglot. How many languages do you speak?
Well, I always get that question. I mean, depends how well I have to speak them for them to qualify, but up to 20, let's say, half of which I can use comfortably anytime, and the others are a little bit rusty or I'm in the process of learning them. But I have engaged with 20 languages. Let's put
Yes,
it that
which
way.
is amazing. Steve actually has an amazing YouTube channel, you guys. I want to tell you about that first because you have to check it out. It's just Lingo Steve is the name of the YouTube
All
channel.
one word. Yep,
All
all
one
one word.
word.
Yep.
Fantastic. So, Steve was on the show actually a while ago, IELTS Energy episode 905. So, guys, go back and listen to that episode because he teaches you 3 steps to master any language. So, go back and listen to that, guys, because today we are digging in specifically into the difference between English for speaking and writing. Do we have to learn this in a different way? Are there different resources? That's what we're digging into today with expert linguist Steve Kaufmann. All right. So here's the big question. Is there a difference in how we learn English for speaking and writing?
So first of all, I want to congratulate you on how clearly you speak, which is very helpful to people who are trying to learn the language. I will try to speak just as clearly myself. All right.
Thank you.
Um, Obviously the language is one. I firmly believe the language is one. We sometimes hear about courses for business English or special needs English.
Mhm.
My view always is you have to elevate all of your skills.
Yeah.
Your listening skills, your reading skills, your speaking skills, your writing skills, it's one package. If you want to learn slang, you listen to more slang.
Mhm.
If you want to, learn medical English, you listen or you read more material that relates to that field.
Sure.
So you can target what it is you're dealing with and gradually get used to the terminology, etc., that relates to that. So every time you are reading something, you are also practicing your writing skills because you
Yes.
are acquiring words and phrases and structures. And if your writing needs are for academic purposes,
Mhm.
then you should read and even listen to material that is academic in nature
Yeah.
or that deals with your particular field. However, and one other thing, I have always practiced, like I went to university in France. So I had to do all my courses in French. I had to write my essays in French. And I always took the position, and it was the same when I was learning Chinese, just make the writing an extension of my speaking. So
Mhm. Mhm.
therefore, I try not to speak in too sort of slangy a way.
Okay.
So that there's no sense that when I speak, I'm, hi, you guys, how you doing? Very sort of, no, I like to be as neutral as possible in a foreign language. In
Sure,
my own
sure.
language, I can do what I want because it's second nature. You don't even have to think about it.
So
But in a
yeah.
language I'm learning, I want to be as neutral as possible when I speak. So then my writing becomes an extension of my speaking. And the last point I would make is to write well, you have to write a lot.
Yes, yes.
So we can take it from there.
So here's the difficulty for our listeners taking IELTS.
Mm.
On the IELTS speaking test, they are scored on their ability to communicate a range of English from
Mm-hmm.
informal
Mm-hmm.
to formal. It has to be appropriate to the question, of course, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
example, in part 1, it's very relaxed. It's like, do you enjoy going to the movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in
Mm-hmm.
part 3, we'll have broader, more academic questions like, how can individuals help solve climate change or something? So
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
types of English they have to produce, it can't be like neutral. So what I'm gathering from your advice is that it's all comes back to the input, right? So we need input
Mhm.
for that informal and input for
Mhm.
that formal side.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, but you know what? When we speak our own language,
Mhm.
we don't consciously say, I'm going to talk about global warming or some other serious subject, and therefore I will speak in a more serious way.
Yeah,
And when I'm with my buddies, I will speak in some other way. It just naturally happens.
true.
And so I don't think we need to have a strategy for that. I think that the subject matter will necessarily dictate that. And if you are asked a serious question, you have to put some thought into what do you believe about this subject? And you typically you have to try to organize your thoughts a little better, even in an oral test. And when I was a student in France, we had lots of oral exams, by the way, where you were given a minute to organize your thoughts, and you had to have them organized in a way that was persuasive and made sense.
Sure.
So obviously, for a more serious subject, you have to organize your thoughts better, but you're still drawing on the words, the structures, the phrases that you have, and you will know if your level in the language is good, which words, which structures
Yeah,
are most appropriate for this particular subject and which are more appropriate for some other subject.
true.
I would also say that whatever we do, before we get into the subject of writing,
Mhm.
but just in terms of acquiring the language skills you need, um, you know, we should vary what we use as input material.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's good for the brain. Variety is good for the brain.
Mhm.
Don't just sit there and I'm gonna, master this thesis on whatever it might be, carbon emissions. Do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If we vary the content that we're dealing with, we're getting that wide variety of terminology of expressions, and then we're prepared then for writing. But
Yeah.
writing has a big advantage over speaking, and that is that we have more time to prepare.
100%,
More time to
100%
prepare.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to summarize what you just said for our
Right.
students because it does come back to your initial opinion of that we when we are learning a language, it be
Mm-hmm.
it for a test or, for just travel, whatever. The we're not learning just one kind of English, let's say.
Right.
We
Right.
need input from a wide variety of sources, from formal to
Mm-hmm.
informal, from daily conversation to specific topics, because you don't know what situation you'll meet in real life and what you'll have to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also true on the exam. So,
Mm-hmm.
guys, listeners, when you are preparing for IELTS, you don't know what topics you're going to have to talk about or write about. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you
Mm-hmm.
guys need to take in this just all of the English that you possibly can. And then
Right.
you're familiar
Right.
with what's formal and informal. And you could reach that natural instinct that Steve is talking about when you're asked an
Exactly.
informal question, you can respond appropriately with the right language, right? Formal or informal.
Absolutely. We have to understand that the way our brains enable us to cope with life. I mean, forget just language learning. And
Yeah.
this means we have to be able to anticipate what's going to happen.
Yes.
We couldn't get through life. So I meet you, I kind of start having a sense about you based on, messages that you're sending to me that my brain is used to, anticipating what this is going to be like.
Sure.
And the broader the range of our experience, the better we are at anticipating. If we're
Definitely.
put into a situation that we've never been in before, it's very hard for us to operate. And so, if I use the example of Japanese, for example, where there is formal language, I can't just learn formal language. In a formal situation, you use these words. If I haven't experienced that enough, then I won't naturally be able to use the formal language. Similarly, say with slang or heaven forbid swear words, we have to know how to use those and when
Right.
to use them. So if someone learns, say a swear word, heaven forbid, or slang, but doesn't use it appropriately,
Right.
then it doesn't work. But when you have a natural sense of where slang is appropriate.
Yeah,
You will use it naturally. So you can't shortcut that. You have
exactly.
to be exposed to so much of the language, be in so many different situations. Your brain is now sort of anticipating what kind of a situation you're in, and the
Mhm.
brain will help you come up with the appropriate expressions. So far, we've basically talked about building up that capability to write well, but I think there are some other things that I think are specific to writing well.
Okay.
But it starts with the base, and the base is very strong, knowledge, vocabulary, experience, having read, listened to, and been exposed to a lot of different content.
So here's a question for you. Would you say that um the best way to prepare for sort of speaking is by getting the oral input, the listening input, and then writing, it's more about reading the language and getting input that way?
No, no, because the two are connected.
Yeah.
And listening helps me read.
Okay.
Listening gives me momentum. And also, even maybe to some extent in our own language, but any language that we are learning,
Mhm.
we are sub-vocalizing all the time. We are, in fact, speaking. In fact, there is evidence that when we read, we're using the same parts of our brain as when we speak. We are actually speaking the words that we read.
That
So
makes
the
sense
two
to
are
me. Yeah.
closely connected. The I find that listening, excuse me, gives me more momentum. Certain phrases that I've had bouncing around that I've heard rather. The reading is perhaps easier to accumulate vocabulary.
Mhm.
Reading, um,
'Cause you have more
but I
time
think
with it.
you have more time. But I definitely recommend that people do both. If you can
Yeah.
find, I mean, one of the things we're now doing at Link is we can grab MP3 files from podcasts, import them into Link, and automatically transcribe those. So because I like anything that I'm listening to, I'm going to miss. Either I'm going to notice some key phrases that I'm interested in being able to use. I want to see them again,
Mhm.
or words that I didn't understand. So when I listen to something, I want to be able to read it.
So
And
yeah.
so combining the two is important.
100%, 100%. I love just the realization that I hope our listeners are having, that reading is also linked to speaking, because I think
Yes.
in preparing for, English or any language exams, everything seems isolated and is practiced in
Hmm.
isolation, right? Like right now I'm going to get better at listening, or right now I'm going to get better at reading, right? But what Steve is saying, guys, is that there are no there's nothing in a vacuum. No English
Right.
skill exists on its own. Everything is connected. And that's so true, cuz when I read all the time. I love reading. I'm always saying it out loud in my head, like how else are you going to get the language in there and understand what's happening? Um
Right.
okay, fantastic. So with writing, now writing needs some extra skills, right? Like
Hmm.
the punctuation, a little more grammar flair with the complex sentences. There's a little more there. Would you say that the way that you teach language on LinkQ, should I say LinkQ or Link?
It doesn't matter. Both. We hear
I
both.
love it. Guys, check it out. LingQ, LINGQ.com. Um,
Right.
So we're exploiting one thing and learning as much as we can. So we have an audio MP3 with the transcript that you can read. Do you think reading those transcripts helps with writing as well?
Yes. And but writing, as you say, introduces the question of punctuation.
Yeah.
And here again, I think doing a lot of reading.
Mhm.
Uh, Something we do at Link is we have this sort of sentence view where we have to reconstitute, like scramble the words, and you have to put it back together again, including punctuation.
Nice.
But you eventually have to get a sense of, because even in English, my own language, I wonder sometimes, do I need a comma there?
Me
Do I
too.
not need a comma there? We all question it, and it all relates to the sort of rhythm of the message. And
Mhm.
so we have to gradually improve in our ability to put commas in.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say too with writing, it's just like speaking. Like I'm a great proponent of input based learning,
Mhm.
but to speak well, you have to speak a lot.
Yes,
So to write well,
exactly.
you have to write a lot.
Exactly.
And I think it's a good discipline if say your listeners, they read something. on a serious subject.
Mhm.
Now they have to write something on that subject. So the first thing they have to do is they have to organize what they're going to say. So I think it's very useful to have a formula. Introduction, part one, part two, conclusion. Okay, that's a
Definitely.
formula.
Yeah.
Something, not all over the place, not just running on from paragraph to paragraph. Have a formula. It'll help you organize your thoughts. So if you have a formula, and now then write something. And at first, and we don't like to write. Like, it's much easier to talk. So practice writing. You're going to come across the issue of spelling, which doesn't come up when we speak. You're
Mhm.
going to come up across the issue of punctuation. The advantage if you're writing, especially if you're writing online, is you can look up words, you can look up the spelling of words, or you have a spell
Definitely.
corrector,
Yeah.
whatever. So there are things that help you. But you have to do it, and you'll make the same spelling mistake 10 times, and eventually you won't make it anymore. But that's why it's so important to write a lot. Say, I'm going
Definitely.
to write whatever it is, 500 words, 300 words. I'm going to organize it this way: part one, part two, or intro, part one, part two, conclusion, something. And then start writing. Look up the words you can't spell. Look up the words you're not sure of.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe Chat GPT will correct your punctuation. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, why
I
not?
think it
So
can.
do it, and just keep doing it, and don't get frustrated if you keep making the same mistake, because you will. But if you keep doing it, there will be fewer mistakes. Hopefully,
Exactly.
gradually, slowly, it
Exactly.
improves.
Our brains are not as efficient or magical as we wish they were. Guys,
That's right.
we have to learn the same lesson so many times before it sticks. And I love
Hmm.
the messages today that Steve has given us, not just for the test, but for the English you're learning for the rest of your life, guys, because IELTS isn't
Right.
the whole reason you're learning English. You're learning English so you can participate in the world academically, at work, in life, in your community, in your future community, guys. That's why you're learning English, right? And it all comes
Right.
back to the range of input, right? I think that's the first tip
Hmm.
today that we went through is that you guys have to be getting as much English as you can from different sources about different topics. And then just as important, guys, just as important, and this is where a lot of students fall off, is the output. I think a lot of students
Hmm.
are comfortable reading by themselves, listening passively, but when they're asked to produce the language, then they're like, oh, I think I'll just listen to another podcast instead. No, you have to make that choice to produce writing and speaking as much as you can. And it will be
Right.
hard, but you will get better.
Correct. And don't worry about it. Just do it.
Don't worry about it. That's really the last takeaway, I think, guys. Just don't worry about it. All right, guys. So Steve, one last time, can you tell us what your YouTube channel is and maybe just a couple things that students might find on there?
Okay, so it's Lingo, like Lingo Steve, all one word.
Perfect.
And basically, I try to encourage people to embrace uncertainty in language learning.
I love it.
Enjoy it. Enjoy the process. Every time you forget, every time you don't understand, that's absolutely normal.
Mhm.
The brain learns, but it learns slowly.
Yes.
The brain learns. That's how it functions, but it learns slowly. So
Right.
just keep at it. Find ways to enjoy the process so
Yes.
that you stay with it, and you will eventually get better.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. And guys, remember, go back and listen to Steve's last guest appearance, IELTS Energy 905. 3 tips to master any language. And check out his YouTube channel Lingo Steve, all one word. All right, awesome. Thanks, Steve. I hope you have a
Thank
wonderful
you,
rest of your
Jessica.
day.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye
Bye.
bye.